Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to look at something interesting. So we're going to look at two videos. And the only reason there's two videos because the first video was shot about the 1918 flu pandemic. And it was shot in October of 2019. So, and in this video, this is done by the, I'm going to mispronounce this, the Mutter Museum. So this is a medical museum in Philadelphia. It is on my bucket list to visit. It is filled with medical oddities. So this is through their channel, but the person, how I got to it was I watched a channel called Ask a Mortician with a woman by the name of Caitlin Doughty, who is a mortician. She's part of an organization called The Good Death, which talks about death positiveness and how to deal with bodies and how not to be afraid of bodies. And she doesn't, why she's trained as an embalmer, she does not do embalming. But she has this conversation with another Caitlin Doughty, who works at the Mutter Museum. And in one video, again, talking about, in October of 19, they're talking about the 1918 flu pandemic. In the second video, they address the nice little thing where they're pretty much saying, we're pretty much waiting on the next major epidemic. And then COVID happens. So the next video is, no, they're not predicting this. No, they're not some seers or anything. We're still, a lot of scientists who worked in the medical fields, like, it's coming. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we're going to have a next pandemic. It's just, and of course things were already going on. That COVID was already probably in the United States at that time, or will be there, I think maybe October. They are tracing it back to October, November of 19. So this is an interesting, it's about a 15-minute video where they're talking about the Spanish flu, basically. And no, it did not originate in Spain. It was just, everybody else was in the middle of a bloody world war, and Spain was neutral. So they were essentially, because of the World War propaganda, they didn't want it to be let out that a bunch of people were dying of this bloody flu, and so they blamed it on Spain because they were neutral, and basically Spain was actually talking about it. Nobody else was. So we don't actually have, there's not a ton of information on where this came from and how it started, and we're kind of iffy about it because the war was going on and things were not fun. So, yeah, the young men were dying over there. But specifically, they talk about an event that happened in Philadelphia, where despite the fact that they were very much aware that there was a flu pandemic going on, that young people were dying like crazy, they threw a parade. And why they can't directly connect it to this, a matter of days later, the hospitals were like overrun and people were dying. The interesting thing about, of course, the Spanish flu is it was a new flu, and it was killing off the young. This was normally flus, as we see what's going on here. And particularly with COVID, is they normally kill off the very old or the very young. We're talking people who don't have good immune systems. Basically people who are immunocompromised, which i.e. the older people and the really young. The Spanish flu pandemic was going after people in their prime. It was going after men and women who are in their late teens, 20s, early 30s. Essentially people who are in their prime of life. So this messed things up like crazy. Not only was there a war going on, which again was also killing people around, particularly men around that age. They were missing men, so they had difficulty burying bodies because they were not really embalming that much. They didn't have a place to keep them cold, and they didn't have heavy machinery to dig things back then. So you were digging graves by hand, and they didn't really have a lot of good identification because you had people founding in hospitals. Entire families were dying. So it's kind of an interesting video talking about the history of that, and how they were. Vaccines, of course, were still, I believe they had, medical science was still really in its infancy, particularly germ theory. So this was still, it was still very much in its infancy. There were still people who believed in the miasma theory, which, if you're not aware of what that is people thought disease came from stinky things. So, rotting corpses, garbage, it's the smells from stinky things that was causing disease rather than, viruses, because they couldn't see them. So, that's miasma theory, basically. That's the reason during the plague you'll see those giant beaks things where the masks are wearing. Those are filled with sweet smelling herbs and stuff. Because again, they're afraid of, they think they can prevent the disease by not breathing it in. So, but that was still kind of prevalent. It's 1918, so again, science is, particularly medical science, modern medical science is still very, very much in its infancy. So it's very interesting to hear these two women who work in the case of our museum curator here, talking about the history of the museum of the medical stuff, and our Caitlin, who's working in mortuary science now and looking into the history of it, talking about how much trouble they had dealing with the bodies and what to do with the bodies and how people are handling this and how we don't really have accurate numbers because people were dying at home and then they don't know what to do with the bodies, and it was a confused mess, and then you have a war going on. So you have people dying overseas, so it's hard to get an accurate number. But they do talk about how they, despite the fact that everybody knew this flu was going around, and they still threw a giant parade and it killed a bunch of people because you have a whole bunch of people crowded together. They also talk about poverty and how, because people on the poor end were crammed together. You can't get out. You're working in closed quarters, you're living in closed quarters, you're living on top of people, so things spread like wildfire. And again, they don't have easier access to any kind of healthcare. And how they transferred over to kind of right now. They did talk a little bit about what would happen and are we prepared. And I think one of them talked to like their brother, mortuary. Caitlin knows somebody who's in DC, and she's like, yeah, we're not ready. Nobody's ready. We're not ready for this. If we got hit with another pandemic, it would be a disaster. It was a disaster. So now we have a second video. I'm going to jump back over to my YouTube and go back to that one. So the next one is again, it's on the Mutter's channel. It's a long video. It's about an hour and 14 minutes long. So it's a decently long video here, where they're talking about COVID and how it kind of came out. And they talk about the mass graves that people were seeing in New York, which is normal. This is what they do with the indigent dead on this island. They've been doing it for hundreds of years. And yes, they're put in mass graves. And what they were doing with the COVID is essentially sometimes these were poor people who had no money, or families who were hit by economic problems who couldn't afford a funeral. It's not that they didn't have family, it's just they can't afford it. They can't afford to bury their dead because they've been hit by the economic mess that happened in COVID-19, where for I think one of the first times in history, the industries that were hit the worst were entertainment and hospitality, hotels and restaurants, and travel. I mean, I know technically 9/11 hit the airline industry hard, but I think COVID hit it harder because, again, people were traveling, people were hiding. There was, people were being able to travel. It's like, you can't go anywhere, we're not going to let you in. And people were getting stuck, as well as the cruise ships. Not that we care about the cruise ships. And of course, there were people getting stuck on the cruise ships, and being kept stuck on the cruise ships because of COVID. But they did talk about, it's like, no, we did not actually predict this. Most people in the medical industry who deal with death were predicting this. they were expecting it and nobody was listening. So that's kind of what they talk about. They talk about the issues in New York where they had those government offered the hospitals a bunch of those freezers for the dead. The problem is this did not help the private businesses that then had to bury them. So that was not, the government then did not transfer that help to the mortuaries, which really didn't have the space to, and the refrigeration to store these bodies. I mean, they have, I think, maximum of like maybe some like 6 or 7 coolers in a small private business at a time. That's all they can handle. Caitlin talked when they were, I don't know, this video, the previous one, where they talked about, it's like, can LA County handle a disaster like this? No. Their morgue can't handle this. Their morgue is always full because it's LA. So, and they couldn't. And I remember watching, I can't remember another video where Caitlin's like, we're talking about how are the morticians. No, they're not. They were not making bank in this. It was a massive, massive mess trying to deal with the corpses, which are people's friends and family, but they're still corpses. You have to deal with the bodies because there was a lot of people dying. There's still a lot of people dying because people are idiots now. Now it's mostly people, mild people we feel sorry for, or morons who refuse to get vaccinated. So there are the people who can't get vaccinated and there are idiots who refuse to. We don't feel sorry for the idiots who refuse to. Sorry, we don't. But again, but this is an hour-long video that's talking about COVID, and this was done, this is early. This is early on. This was still 2 years ago. I think this was like February or something, February or March, right after the pandemic started. So let me see, when was this? No, this is showing up as December 11th. No, this is end of December. This is December 11th of 2020. So this was about a year or so later, but still, we didn't have a vaccine at the time this video was shot. The vaccine didn't come out for another couple of weeks, and then of course it took forever to come out, and now we're having boosters. I think I've had 4 shots total for COVID alone. That's not just, and then of course my flu shot. My toddler's had, besides her flu shot, she's had 3 since then. But this is an hour long video. It's very, very interesting. It's very, very in depth, where they're talking about what's going on. They're talking about dealing with the death stuff. They're talking about all these problems when it comes to some of the issues, of course, that we dealt with during 2020, where they're getting mixed messages. I mean, it's like, go out but be safe, and I think part of it, I think, is one of the things they mentioned, is too much was put on the individual to, basically, government trusted people to be smart when they are very much aware that people, particularly as a group, are not smart. As mentioned in, strangely enough, the film Men in Black, when it's I believe this line from Kay, where he says the person is smart, people are panicky and crazy. As a group with mob mentality, we're not smart. We're pack animals who have tendency to go with the herd, so to speak. We go with the pack. And the pack was, particularly the leaders of our pack, were giving us very, very messed up messages, including the big orange face Cheeto thing. We're so glad. Hopefully that will end up in prison one of these days, or, shipped off to Russia as it collapses around them. This is being shot in January 19th of 2023. So that's when I'm shooting this video. It isn't, again, I'm not going to go in too much detail because it's an hour-long video, and I listened to it while scrubbing my bathroom floor after I paint my daughter's bathroom floor, because I was painting in there and it became a mess because it's a tiny bathroom. And I thought it would be easy, and it wasn't. So that's what I actually watched this probably around the time of COVID as well. But it was hard to pay attention to because we were in the mix of 2020. Though I think by the time I would have watched this video, things would have calmed down sort of, in the United States. You know, this was before the 6th of December or the 6th of January when, you know, a group of crazed mob nutcases tried to overthrow the government and broke into the Capitol building. And we're still putting them in prison. We still haven't gotten the head honcho. Maybe. I'm not counting on it, but maybe. But still, it's a very, very interesting video. It's very, very informative. If you do get a chance, I mean, again, I will repeat this, is massively on my bucket list. It is not on my husband's. He does not want to go to this museum. I want to go to the Mutter. I have for a very long time. It is in Philadelphia. It has a lot of very interesting specimens in there. So that's the end of this video. If you like what you see, be sure to check out the rest of the channel. I'm doing a bunch of vaccine stuff this month. I think I'm doing unicorns after this. Let me double check. What am I doing after vaccines? Where am I? Vaccines. Am I doing? No, I'm doing music after this. I've already done unicorns. Or unicorns might be going on at the same time. It's randomly staring. I covered the Caribbean American History Month this year. I did a bunch of, I essentially do Irish stuff in March, along with half a dozen other things. I'm halfway through 2023 when I'm filming this. So I have a lot of stuff already available. I'm covering multiple series this year, which I think I'm going to carry into 2024. I'm covering the Princess Diaries, 2 Tamora Pierce series, the Guardians of Ga'Hoole. I'm going to go back, which the Guardians of Ga'Hoole is going on right now when you guys view this. I'm going back to Meg Cabot for a short preteen series. Then I'm going back to Catherine Lassie to cover her wolves and her polar bears, which will go into 2024. And then on my tentative list, again, this isn't fully planned yet, though I'm mentioning in a bunch of videos, so I'm probably going to do it. I'm going to go into the Animorphs, and then I'm probably going to follow that with an in-depth look at the Anne of Green Gables. I have done an Anne of Green Gables video already, like one of my first videos that I did for this channel, which is like an hour long. But I'm going to go in depth with a bunch of short series where I'm going to look at the books. I'm actually going to look at the Road to Avonlea TV series, which I'm close to having the entire collection. I guess I'm buying them. So, because they were part of my childhood. So I'm going to be covering those after I do the Animorphs, which I think is depressing. Again, the Princess Diaries, if you were not watching those videos, were a reaction to me doing the 13 books of The Last Apprentice, which is a middle school horror series. Horror is not my genre. It's just not. So that is what is going on. I'm playing with the idea of going after the Anne of Green Gables, of looking at the Boxcar Children. So we will see. Again, this is January 2023, and my brain is already jumping to 2024. So like and subscribe. Leave a positive comment if you have one. Look forward to more videos. I am consistent, and you will get travel videos. I have some travel videos. That's the other thing. You're hopefully going to get at least 2 in 2023, depending on what's going on. So 2 travel videos of what it's like to be traveling with an older 3-year-old or possibly a 4-year-old, depending on when we go and what trips we do this year. So like and subscribe. Thank you.